The Washington Capitals have opened training camp with high expectations as usual, but injuries and new faces mean some changes in our nation's capital. Dan Holmi of Locked On Caps is with us to talk about that and all things Washington Capitals next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Gil Martin, so glad you could be with us today, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Capitals, Dan Holmi. And Dan, are you as excited as I am about the opening of training camp and preseason games, which are just around the corner?
I sure am. I've spent this last summer kind of like you talking about what could have been, what should have been with our teams. Now the rubber meets the road and we see what our teams really have in the tank for the Washington Capitals as Alex Ovechkin goes after his goal chase of Gordie Howe, and just some exciting moves around the Washington Capitals.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, Alexander Ovechkin comes across as someone who knows and appreciates the history of the game and the legacy of a guy like Gordie Howe. What does this chase mean to him in particular?
Well, I mean, they asked him about it yesterday, and they were asking him about his goal chase. And he said, listen, guys, it's 21 goals. I'm not going to get that in the first game. So, kind of slow down a little bit here. But Ovechkin now has 780. He's 21 away from Gordie Howe and 114 from number one Wayne Gretzky. So I do think that there is an opportunity, a pretty good chance that Ovechkin could catch Gordie Howe this year. And, I've talked to different people and they don't think that Ovechkin has enough runway to catch Wayne Gretzky. Don't tell him that. He scored 50 goals when he was 36 years old. So don't sleep on Alex Ovechkin. I definitely think that it's in his future.
Yeah, he's certainly going to make a run for it. No question about that. And it will be interesting to say the least. But, to pass Gordie Howe, who, played this game until he was in his mid-40s in a very different era, who is, Mr. Hockey to so many people of that generation. That is a very big honor, to say the least. And Alex Ovechkin, I think, means something similar to the people who grew up watching him in this generation.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is they were talking to different players about Alex Ovechkin, and they were talking to John Carlson, and they said, we were getting, we know he was getting a lot of goals, but Jesus, I mean, he's getting crazy here. He's breaking all-time records. So for us to be alive to witness this, I think is just a really monumental moment because, I think that sometimes you can only appreciate things after the fact, but to be living through this and watching Alex Ovechkin kind of knocking out all these milestones one after one, it's very exciting just to kind of take it all in, as an NHL fan, just in general. I know that, that this is a general NHL podcast, but just to know that you are live to see Alex Ovechkin breaking all these records. And I do think that he definitely will pass Gordie Howe this season.
If he stays healthy, he should do it. I would assume sometime around the All-Star break, give or take. It would be my estimation. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to the Washington Capitals than just the Great Eight. And, one thing is when you talk about Alexander Ovechkin, everybody also always seems to mention Nicklas Backstrom, who's been his center for most of his career, his setup man. And yet we know Backstrom is going to miss some time, but you mentioned there was some news about Backstrom and his recovery.
Yes. So yesterday at training camp, they were talking and he kind of gave an update to his condition. He said, listen, before I had this procedure done, I had a hard time putting on my shoes. I had a hard time tying my shoes. I had a hard time playing with my kids. It wasn't a decision that he came to easily. He knew that it was always an option out there. But he said that now for the first time in a long time, he can walk and move around without any pain. they asked him, when he was on the ice, because he was in the team photo, were you tempted to take a lap? And he laughed and said, yeah, tempted. And, for a guy like Nick Backstrom, who's been such an integral part of not this team, just in general, but also Alex Ovechkin, I mean, if you take a look at it, Backstrom assisted on 274 of Ovechkin's career goals. Ovechkin has assisted on 106 of Backstrom's goals. Additionally, Backstrom has assisted on 117 of Ovechkin's NHL record 279 goals. So those two kind of go together like a hand in glove. And, you got to think to a certain extent that Alex Ovechkin is really going to be missing his right-hand man out there. And I know that they don't play on the same line together anymore. It's generally Kuznetsov on that top line, but just that long history together. And I don't think that Ovi would be the player he is today without Nick Backstrom.
No question about it. You've got some other newcomers on this team: Connor Brown, Dylan Strome, Connor McMichael. Talk to me about them and where they fit into this team.
So in today, when they were doing the interviews, they were talking to Dylan Strome, and he kind of has a chip on his shoulder. He feels like he was discarded by the Chicago Blackhawks, and he really wants to prove things to the world that he is a legitimate, great player out there. And I don't really know what's going on with the Blackhawks. It seems like there's some poor decision-making going on with that team, but we are excited to have him on the team, ostensibly to be the second-line center in Nick Backstrom's absence, but he also has the ability to play left and right wing. So, say Backstrom does come back at some point this season, he can always play another position.
No question about that. And that flexibility is another weapon in the arsenal of the Washington Capitals. New goaltender this year in Darcy Kuemper. Talk about his addition and what it means to this Capitals team.
I mean, it's huge. The Washington Capitals suffered from inconsistency in net the entire season last season. And what did Brian McClellan do? He went out and swung for the fences and connected by signing Darcy Kuemper, Stanley Cup winning Darcy Kuemper. Darcy Kuemper signed a 5-year deal at $5.25 million. In 57 games for Colorado in 21-22, Kuemper went 37-12-4. with a .921 save percentage and a 2.54 goals against. So on paper, it seems like he is going to be a great goalie. Now, some of the things that aren't spoken of too often is he is also a long list on the injury list. So if as long as the Capitals can keep Darcy Kuemper healthy, I think the arrow's pointing up for this team.
Yeah, it does make a difference. How much confidence would they have in the players behind Kuemper if he has to miss some time?
I mean, that's the biggest thing. When we're doing a comparable on Darcy Kuemper, that is how well he played on Colorado with their defense in front of them, right? But like I was talking with JJ Regan of NBC Sports Washington, you can't just kind of sleep your way through, regardless of who's in front of you. You have to be a legit goaltender to do well. So, the backup behind him is Charlie Lindgren, kind of an unproven commodity a little bit, but, was really standout with St. Louis and their AHL affiliate Thunderbirds. So we're hoping that Darcy and Charlie are a good tandem and definitely a welcome change from Ilya and Vitek. And don't get me wrong, I wish them nothing but the best for their respective teams in New Jersey and Toronto, but change was ready, or it was due for this team.
Yeah, sometimes change of scenery benefits both the team and the player. Dan, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find the audio podcast wherever you get your podcast. You can also find it on YouTube, and then also on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps, or my personal account at DanCaps218. And just give it a listen as we go through the season. I got you covered for the Capitals all season long.
All right, Dan, lots of excitement in Washington this year, and you can keep up with it by listening to Locked On Capitals with Dan Holmi. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Today's sponsor has a product I literally use every day. I started taking AG1 because I'm not a great pill taker, and I didn't want to have to take so many pills in order to get the nutrition and vitamins that I need. So what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All these things. And look, it's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day, and that's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.